one.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Exceptional Results Now. We are so excited to have you with us today. Exceptional Results, we are a coaching and a consulting service that is designed to illuminate your path of exceptionalism. And we believe in aligning what we call the 4 Ps, and that is people, purpose, profit, and planet. We believe in authenticity and allowing you to be your authentic self. You'll be able to make and drive that impact and live out your purpose. Today we are focusing on storytelling and why that's important, which definitely is a part of being your authentic self and being that impactful leader. Your ability to tell your story authentically and being yourself and who you are is going to attract the right people into your personal life, into your business, and you'll be able to make that impact in both your personal and professional life, which will impact the planet. And today, I am your host, Rasha, and I am the managing partner and the president of Exceptional Results Now. And I am here with my co-host, my friend, my partner, my coach, and that is no other than Jason Safford himself. Jason is a wonderful friend, of course, to me and everyone in his life. Jason is a great father, a husband, and he is the founder and the CEO of Exceptional Results Now. And I am so excited to introduce him to you because he's got a great story to tell, and we're going to use his story as an example of how you could authentically tell your story. And we're gonna use that story as an example of why that is so important for you to be able to do the same thing. So without further ado, Jason, if you could tell us about yourself and tell us your story.
Rasha, thank you very much. And for our listeners, yes, I'm very excited to first announce, and it's coming out in the press release that Rasha Swify is now the president of Exceptional Results Now. We're absolutely ecstatic to be able to announce that, and I couldn't be more excited for you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And on that note, we also want to let our listeners know that going into 2021, we're in our last few weeks here, but we're excited to be launching the Exceptional Life, which this podcast is really the standard bearer of. The Exceptional Life being our entire theme for exceptionalism and how we deliver services through these packages so that anyone who's interested in being an entrepreneur or is in business or even an executive of a multi-billion-dollar company and they want to improve their impact and really take things to the next level, that's what Exceptional Results Now is focused on. And that's what our tagline is driving impact, because we do focus on aligning people and planet for profit and purpose, as Rasha mentioned. Now, that being said, I'm delighted to be able to talk about storytelling. This is one of the very important aspects of our program in the Exceptional Life Journey. And Rasha, very few people know or would believe that I was actually born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, because no,
Yeah.
I don't present that Brooklyn accent that everybody's always looking for, but I know it and I grew up with it.
Mhm.
But no, I am very proud of being originally a resident of Brooklyn, New York. And my
Yeah.
parents were a part of a group of people known as the original gentrification. So they went into neighborhoods. I grew up in Park Slope, Brooklyn, and they were a striving, what we'll call striving middle-class couple who were looking for a place to set down roots and raise their children. And at that time, Brooklyn was not a very safe place to live. However, it was a lot cheaper than Manhattan, where they were living. And, a little bit of background for people. My parents actually had moved from Kentucky, where they got married.
Mhm.
And my father was the head of what's called an Office of Equal Opportunity in rural Kentucky. And my mother, had graduated from Georgetown and had a background in political science and foreign affairs, but she, married my father and chose to support him and moved to the backwoods of Kentucky to help people who otherwise didn't even have running water, to
Wow.
learn how to get services and jobs and employment and just make a better life for themselves. So that's a little bit about the background of the two people who raised me. And they chose to pick a neighborhood in Brooklyn, which was very, very ethnically diverse. And I remember growing up in this beautiful brownstone, which they got for what they call a song. They were able to invest. It was a significant amount of money at the time, obviously for them, but it was a steal when
Mm,
you think about Brooklyn's real estate now. But I remember growing up and, I had Puerto Rican and Dominican and Cuban and all sorts of different Caribbean countries all around me on one side. And on the other side, I had South American and African, Polish, German, Russian. It was literally the melting pot on my neighborhood block.
mm,
And on top of that, this is a time in American history where kids could play outside safely in the street. And so I
mm,
grew up playing stickball and football and wiffle ball and all sorts of different activities that people wouldn't understand in rural areas like stoop ball or kings in a corner or scully. Games that you had to grow up in a very, very inner city urban environment to understand.
mm,
So I like to say that I was a part of the first generation of integration. And a lot of people don't understand that before my generation, a lot of kids didn't mix between being white or being any type of colored ethnicity.
mhm,
And um, the exposure was something that not only did I take for granted, but I didn't understand what racism was until an incident that happened in my childhood.
mhm,
And the shock to me was the fact that everybody around me reacted. And that was using the N word
mm,
that, everybody now, is terrified of using. And I don't know where I learned it. But the incident was that I had gone to the corner store, which we call bodegas, and I had purchased a blue rubber ball, which we used for stickball.
mhm.
And it was a huge accomplishment for any kid to save up enough money to buy one of these balls. And these balls, you hit it right. This thing traveled like you were,
Yeah.
Roberto Clemente hitting it out of the park.
I love them.
And yeah, and the um, excitement that I had for this ball, and if the feeling when you get that new toy, whatever it is, and you're walking home and you're all excited. And one of my neighbors was a kid that I really, really had a great relationship with. And his name was Bobo. His family was from the South. I think they were originally from Arkansas. I don't remember now. It's been 41 years since then, or
Mm.
40, 40 years, somewhere around there. I'm just aging myself, but hey, I grew up in the 70s and
You're a young man, Jason.
no, I thank you. I will take every compliment I can at this point. But the experience of growing up, Bobo and I had this wonderful relationship, and Bobo was as dark as you could get. Okay, he was absolutely, very, very black skinned. And
Mm,
we had this great relationship. Bobo and I would, play stoop ball together and skelly together. And Bobo and really taught me the game of basketball.
mm,
And, we were 5 years old. And I had this new ball. And for some reason, something had happened with Bobo, I think with his mother. He had come outside and he wasn't in a great mood. And I tried to cheer him up and I was like, let's play. And we were playing stoop ball and I beat him in the game. And he grabbed my ball and just turned around and he threw it over the rooftop of the building on the other side of the street. And I was so angry. I could not believe that Bobo would do this in his brand new ball.
Mm,
And just because I beat him, he turned around and threw the ball away. And I
mm.
looked at him and I said, "You stupid nigger." And I
Oh,
was 5 years old. I didn't
yeah,
know what I was doing.
yeah, yeah.
Can you imagine when everybody around you heard you say this word and suddenly it was like the air left the room?
Wow.
And my
Yes.
mother heard it from inside the house. I must have said it that loud. She screamed my name, "Get in here right now." And the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And if you've
Mm.
ever had that feeling of the hair on your back, you're like, "Oh, I just
You
did
know
something.
you were.
Yeah, I'm about to get the beating of my life the way
Yeah.
that I just heard that." And I went inside and, Bobo was crying and I think he ran to his mother who was sitting on the steps or whatever. And, she dressed me down about using that word. And then, um, I went back outside. She made me she said, "You go out and you apologize to him and his mother right now." And I went outside and I apologized. And I said, I don't know what this word means to you. And I'm really sorry because I was just angry that he threw my ball. And his mother was absolutely wonderful. She was just like, "Jason, you didn't know, and it's okay. And thank you very much for apologizing. You know, this isn't your fault. People use these words, and you just use these words because other people use these words. And I may have even called Bobo that word. And because I called it, you may have heard me say it. And so therefore you thought it was okay to say. And I
Well, you were
understand.
5 years old at the
I was
time.
only 5 years old.
That's
But
all in.
that impact for the rest of my life, I have carried with me.
Mhm.
So that is a part of my story. And I share that because I want people to understand just the experience of taking them through that and
Right.
how it impacted me for the rest of my life. This is a story that, people don't often get to know you or understand how you were, raised, what you've done in business, all these different things. So when you get to share a piece of your story like that, obviously now people have an insight into you. What makes you
Mhm.
think? What does certain things for you? And for me, the valuable part of that story that I've taken with me going forward is that you never know what you're going to say that could have an impact on other people. You never know what you're going to do. And I only said that word because I was angry. I didn't know why, but for some reason, it was only in anger that hearing it for somebody else, saying it to somebody, I thought that when I'm angry, I should say that word to somebody of
Mhm.
color.
Mhm.
And so going forward, as I went through life and growing up in Brooklyn, I went to public school first. And because I was hyperactive and very talented in a number of different areas of both academics
I
and athletics.
really have to say something here because
Go ahead.
that was very powerful what you just did and what you just shared. There are a couple of things here. One, at that age, when you do go through an experience like that, it's absolutely like you said, it does impact the rest of your life. But then clearly, it was you used it based on what you were taught, your perception, the program that made you think, okay, well, I can say that word when I'm angry at someone. That's what you do when you're angry at someone. You use that term, and that's exactly what you did as a 5 year old. But now that you are an adult, a professional, um, and a great contributor to society with the work that you do and the actions that you choose to take every day, having the courage to share that right now at this level and be completely open about it and say exactly what you did is very courageous of you, and I have to commend you for that, because even I, as your friend, I didn't know that that happened before. It's my first time hearing the story, and I thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's my privilege and honor to be able to share it. And the point going forward is that as I um, grew up in Brooklyn, in this diversity, in this new era, this new world that was really being created day by day. And we were not a city in good health at the time.
Mm,
And, there were, power outages, there were garbage strikes, there were, all sorts of, violent crime issues. Our house was robbed 3 times. Um, the uh, the block had several shootings, several people were killed, growing up. Crack was an epidemic when I was growing up.
mm,
There were prostitution rings on our block that, I now joke about. Another incredible experience growing up. I do love to tell this story to my friends. They know it, but now I'm going to share it with the world. Is that when I was a very little kid, again, we learned to play basketball. We had a firehouse on our block.
mm,
And basically, we would take a metal garbage um, pail, and we would hang it on the steel fence that
mm,
fenced off the buildings. So
mhm,
when you came out of your building, you had this little sort of open area, and then there was a wrought iron fence with these spikes sticking up. And we would take the garbage bin and we would hang it on one of these, spikes, and then we would shoot a basketball into the garbage. And it was called garbage ball. We
mhm,
did it. They had this nice open area where the fire engine was on the block, or the
mm,
firehouse, I should say. And
mm,
that was how we learned to play basketball.
mm.
I was a huge fanatic of Bernard King and the New York Knicks at the time. And
Yeah.
we're playing garbage ball, and there's a Polish kid, there's a Russian kid, there's a kid from Jamaica, there's a kid from Argentina, there's a kid from Costa Rica, and I think we even had a Somalian. And we're all just having a great time. And in fact, we were playing Skelly on the firehouse pavement about
Mm,
10 minutes before, and now we're playing garbage ball. And this guy walks up the block, and there was a bar at the corner of the block. And it was a traditional old Irish bar where I think there was even a saying at the end of the bar that if you could reach this bar, you could pour yourself a drink, or you could order a drink. So there was no ID back then. If you were 13 years old and you were above the bar, counter, you could ask for a beer.
mhm.
So this guy's walking up the block, and he's staggering. And as he gets closer, we realize that there is a crowbar on the side of his head. And as we look closer, it is actually inside his skull.
Oh,
And, not to gross anybody out, but this is, again, I may have been 7 or 8 years old at the time. We're playing this one, and all of a sudden we're just looking at this dude, and he had the brains literally coming out of the side of his head, but he had the brains enough to know he needed to get to the fire station for, emergency care.
right,
So
right.
he gets to the fire station, and we immediately knock on the door, and the guy comes out, and I think his name was Kelly or something, one of the firemen, and all the firemen loved us and knew us. But he
Mm,
sees the guy, and he immediately sits him down, and he starts tending to him. And the guy is lucid, and he's telling him exactly what happened. And when, Kelly, asked him to get into details, he was like, I'm not saying anything about nobody. So again, that was a code back in the day as well, was that you weren't a snitch. You weren't going to say what happened,
right,
but he had a crowbar in his head, and he's not even complaining about it.
right.
And, so again, that type of exposure to just a different way of life is how I grew up.
Mhm,
And from there, then there was the challenge of that I grew up in public school, but then my parents decided, because of my talents as well as the fact that I was a class clown, because they were very, very well educated people, and so I was learning more at home than I was learning at school. And
mhm.
I was, kind of getting in the teacher's craw about, a lot of things. And so they just were like, no, he has to go somewhere where they're going to pay more attention to him. And so they busted their ass to get me into, and excuse my language, but, they busted their tail to get
I
me to private school. And my challenge there was the fact that now I was with kids whose parents were actually more well off than my parents. And the other thing was that my parents weren't materialistic. And that was another thing that I learned was about, and Michael Jordan had just gotten into the NBA at that time, and Air Jordan went through the roof. And I'll be honest with you, I'm now proud, as much as I love Michael and he's one of my all-time favorites and he's in my book, Winning with Exceptionalism. He is the model to me of exceptionalism. And plug to Michael Jordan right now. If you ever listen to this podcast, I'm giving it to you, man. You are the exceptionalism that I tell people to strive for. But
Absolutely.
he made it to the NBA and people were wearing Air Jordans. And to me, $200 shoes were something I was never going to see. It was never going to be on my feet because my parents were scraping together the money to put my sister and I in private school. And on top of that was that it was just not something that they believed in. They believed in, the quality of life that they gave us was around education and music and experience and just understanding the value of your time in activities and with family. I mean, the greatest experiences we had was when our family all came together. And I always joked, my mother was neither Italian nor Jewish, yet she was the greatest Jewish Italian cook you were ever going to meet. And she cooked for the Italian army, and she was the envy of every Jewish mother because she did a Seder to die for. Um, so so I had this incredible experience of growing up in Brooklyn, and the transition from public school to private school was really difficult because suddenly materialism was in my face. And not only was it materialism, in terms of, you know, people, but it was also materialism that I didn't expect from kids of color. So now I have the kids of color that on my block are envying me because my parents have this beautiful brownstone. And then I had these kids of color at private school who are making fun of me because I don't have Air Jordans. And they're looking down on me because I don't wear anything in terms of apparel or name brands that would make me look preppy or wealthy. In fact, I got made fun of when I was in 8th grade by my friends on the street because I started wearing collared shirts open. And they were like, oh, that's a preppy look. And I got embarrassed because I was trying to fit in with private school. But I was now being ridiculed by my friends on the street. And the truth was that my friends on the street knew me much better than the kids in private school. And then you have that issue of how do you fit in? And, if you know what that feels like, that's one of the things that I think for a lot of people, again, that impact that you carry forward from how, your environment affects you. And, the correlation in terms of storytelling that I'm trying to relate here is that your core, your source, where you come from, if that's not healthy, then all sorts of other things as you go forward are not going to grow in the right direction if they grow at all. And you're going to be stunted in areas of your life that you didn't imagine. And we see this play out in lots of different areas with lots of different leaders. And to touch on a point of what exceptional results now is about, we focus on executive leadership and really trying to help you get back to that source of who you are, even if it's going all the way back to childhood and remembering your most fond memories and building from there. Look, whatever happened to you that was negative, we all unfortunately have negative things that happen in our life.
Yeah.
But you have to clean it out.
Yeah.
You have to make your source healthy.
Yeah.
So for me, what happened was that as I got into high school, I started to look at that impact of that 5-year-old boy who I was and who did I want to be and who were my parents and who was my family. And here I was in this private school And these teachers would say, Jason has incredible potential. He's amazing, but he just doesn't apply himself. And I'm sure there are lots of people listening to this podcast who identify with that and say, yeah, that's me. And that's the truth. A lot of us, especially those of us who become entrepreneurs and those of us who become leaders, we have difficulty applying ourselves because, again, we don't like the system, don't like restriction. We don't like to be governed and told what to do and have to go through things in a certain way. And the challenge of our society and where it was when I was born is that it was trying to integrate for the first time.
Yeah.
And that integration was really assimilation. We weren't bringing in other cultures and adapting or accepting their way of doing things. We were bringing them in and saying, no, there's only one way to do things, which is this way of quote unquote the American way. And
It's like a new identity.
yeah, and what's amazing about it is that when you look at the foundation of America and the principles that we hold high in terms of the Declaration of Independence and the US Constitution and how this country was really built, and they talk about the framers and the founders and all these different powerful people, they didn't like government either. They didn't like restriction. So our entire foundation, our core, our source as a country was about this freedom, this ungoverned, limitless pursuit of happiness and creativity and being authentic in who you are.
Yeah.
So for me, here I was at this very prestigious private school called Packer Collegiate Institute. It was founded by this amazing woman back in 1845 named Harriet Packer and her husband. And, you know, it had been a women's school up until the 1970s. And again, integration. Now they were bringing boys in. And so I was a part of one of the early classes of boys that were in Packer with all of these girls. And, you know, I came in fourth grade. And by the time I was in high school, we were an incredibly diverse private school of lots of different ethnicities and cultures and the gender equality and all of these things. And this is 1990. Okay. So when you look at where we are as a society today, 30 years ago, I was on the forefront of all of this happening. And my question to myself was, who was that little boy when I was 5 years old? What was it that made him say those words? And how do I go forward, making sure that when I get angry, I never think those words again? That when I get angry, that I'm using my energy in a powerful, positive way. And that became one of the things that I thought about, and it was through music and theater and sports that I tried to establish myself as this positive person and become a leader, and not a leader necessarily in that I was the best player on the team, but I was the guy who brought the team together and made us focus on winning together and teamwork and really, you know, bringing things, you know, uh, into an organized coalition, however the cultures worked. And I had my talent, you know, I was a really good baseball player with a God-given right arm to, you know, throw a fastball and a major league. And I was a good basketball player. I became even better in college when I really established myself. And I was also a good soccer player. And for me, you know, the pursuit of sports was something that I really didn't know that I should take seriously. So whatever athletic talent that I really had, I wasn't coached or guided until I was, you know, way past, you know, the time or the focus. So getting to the majors or professional sports for me was probably never a given anyway. But if I had a shot, I needed to be, you know, guided a lot sooner than I was. But that didn't stop me from wanting to act like a pro.
Mhm.
and present myself as a pro and imagine myself. And so going back to Michael Jordan, by the time I'm in high school, he's winning championships. And the way
Mhm.
he's conducting himself, both on the court and off the court, I am just so mesmerized by this dude. And I hate him because he's a Chicago Bull and I'm a Knick fan.
I know, right? I
But at
think
the
we all,
same time, I can't get enough of this dude.
yeah.
And you read about him and people, you know I didn't see Michael Jordan until I was in college, in a real basketball game. But I have enough highlight reels of him, and I'll never forget in the 1992 playoffs. And everybody's, who's a Knick fan will always, if they're listening to this podcast, they're gonna be like, oh man, he brought that up. Michael Jordan made this move on Charles Oakley, who was his friend and buddy,
Mm.
in the baseline in the playoffs, in which he took Oakley to the corner and made him go one way and pivoted around him and then left his feet and dunked over Patrick Ewing. And I saw that and I was like, this is the greatest player that will ever play the game. And it
Mm.
had nothing to do with what he had just done from a physical standpoint. It was what he had thought in his mind, the chess move that he had made on the fly in his mind. And I was just like, there's no person alive that's ever going to be as creative or as persistent to do something like that. And that was a determination I made. And respect to LeBron James and to Kobe Bryant and to Kevin Durant and every player that's played the game in the last 20 years. But I knew that then, and I know it even more now, that just his drive for being the greatest person to play the game of basketball and expose people to what the game could possibly be to a human being. Again, that's what
Also,
you're going to
yeah.
send. Yeah, you're going to send that to the universe. Elon Musk is sending cars to other planets. Dude, send Michael Jordan.
Mm.
And we made that movie Space Jam, and then that's
Yeah.
something that should be sent. And that to me was sort of what drove me forward. So when I got to college, it was about, okay, now I have to figure out my life. I'm on my own, and a great story for people is that my father and mother tricked me, and I say that loving them to death. But
Mm.
I was so excited. We packed up my room into this, Jeep Comanche, huge truck. And I had just gotten my driver's license. And so, my father and I got the opportunity to drive out to Ohio together because I got into Oberlin College. And it was an 8-hour drive. And
Mm.
some of the things that I remember from that is that my father loved old jazz music, and he exposed me to R&B and Motown, and all of this incredible music history. Um, and we were listening to Django Reinhardt, which was a folk guitar player, and he says, you know, you're going to live in the African Heritage House, and you chose that. And I said, yeah. And he said, you're going to probably be the only white person in that house. And this is, we're driving on the highway,
Right.
and there are all these trucks along the highway. And I'm starting to think to myself, I never had a conversation with either my mother or father about what my choice was and the fact that I selected to live in a black dorm.
Mhm.
Suddenly it's hitting me like a ton of bricks that my father is now being like, are you sure you know what you're doing? Are you okay with this decision? And I'm
Right.
100% confident that I was doing the right thing. I had no
Mm.
idea why, but I
Mm.
knew that I needed to immerse myself in Black culture, in African American culture. I wanted to study African American studies. I wanted to know everything about what it was like for people who did not look like me,
Mm.
how they lived, and really understand them. And funny enough,
And
I'm
why was that important, Jason?
going back to that same experience. For me, it was about the source of who I am.
Mm.
I not only needed to clean out any anger, but I also needed to live in this way that, again, I was making a powerful positive impact with my whole self going forward.
Mhm.
And, just sort of a side note to that is the fact that I had the opportunity to climb one of the 7 highest peaks in the world, which is Mount Rainier, 2 years earlier. And I
Mhm.
love mountain climbing. I love the outdoors. I'm a nature buff. Obviously, you see our backgrounds here and part of who we are.
Yeah.
But to relate it is that when you get to a true mountaintop, and Mount Rainier is 14,411 feet. And I know that because, again, once you climb a mountain that high, you're never going to forget that number of what the summit was.
It's true.
When you get to that and you see the world below you, you understand what God created. And if you're an atheist, yes, I'm going to use that word and you're going to appreciate it, because the truth is that humans did not make this planet.
Mhm.
And when you see it from that height that you just climbed and you made it, and you're just like, oh my God, literally. And that
Mhm.
word comes out,
Yeah.
that
Regardless.
comes
Yeah.
out. You suddenly have to stop and respect the creator. And
Absolutely.
so, going back to my authentic self, it was important for me to live and immerse myself in this world because it was the future of our country. It was the future of the world. We were integrating.
Mhm.
And if I was going to be a part of this world in a meaningful way, I needed to understand how people who were not like me looked at me,
Mhm.
and truly be able to speak in their language and understand and appreciate their culture and see things their way, so that if I could do business with them or have any type of interaction with them, because they're exposed to me every day. They're sold it on TV. They walk
Mhm.
outside their house and it's, white people world.
Mhm.
And, going back to, what we're sending out a message to other planets, I don't know, we used to joke about it, was there intelligent life on Earth? Because is there intelligent life, in the universe? It's like, well, is there intelligent life on Earth? Because what is the message that we're sending to other planets?
Mhm.
And we were so far from who we need to be as human beings.
Mhm.
So for me, living in that black dorm was something I had to do. And so here my father and I are sitting in the truck, driving down the highway, all these trucks. And I mean, it was literally like being in the Canyon of Heroes in downtown Manhattan with these
Mhm.
trucks, as they're on either side of us and we're passing through. And I realized that my father, who, by the way, was one of the journalists who covered Martin Luther King during the civil rights era, and actually
Mhm.
was there on the steps when he gave the I Have a Dream speech. And that speech was actually the promissory note speech. People don't realize that it was really about a promissory note that they were coming to collect on, that they had
Mhm.
been given a promise from the United States government and they had never gotten the return on investment from that promissory note.
Mhm.
And it's a it's an amazing speech if anybody ever decides to look it up and read the whole speech. But the point is that here my father was somebody who was fighting poverty and fighting for equality among people of color, and here his son is going to live in a black dorm. And how does he feel about it? Because it's his accomplishment in one way, but it's probably very terrifying.
Mhm.
And so I suddenly turned to him and I was just like, Dad, are you cool with the fact that I'm living in a black dorm? And he suddenly gets very stiff because his son is asking him if he's cool with his decision to live. And he was like, well, yeah, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just more concerned, you know, that, you're not going to be uncomfortable. And I was like, Dad, you and Mom chose to raise me in
Mhm.
inner city Brooklyn. I was
Mhm.
surrounded by black people my entire life. I don't know how to act around white people. That's my problem. And we both had a chuckle about it, and he really appreciated it. But the reason why I say that he tricked me, and he and my mother tricked me, is that we get out to Ohio, we get to the dorm, and this wonderful woman, Yvette Clark, who, Yvette, if you ever listen to the show, I'm plugging you now. Absolutely beautiful, wonderful person. She was the dorm's RA, and she, greeted me and my father, and like she knew ahead of time. There's a white boy living in this dorm. I'm going to put on my best face for him and his father. And,
Oh,
she treats me absolutely wonderful, and she helps us unload and unpack everything, and, get it situated in my room. And as soon as the last box comes in, my father backs up and he stands in the threshold and he waits for me to adjust everything. And I turn around and I think we're going to lunch or whatever. And he looks at me, and I stand straight up, and he looks at me and he extends his hand and he says, "Congratulations. You'll always be a guest in our home." And it hits me like a ton of bricks. And I'm like, my parents just kicked me out of my house. I'm on my own,
yeah.
18 years old. And literally, I am out of my house. I'm out of their house. And he smiles, and I shake his hand. He says, "Now we can go to lunch." And we go to lunch, and I'm like, "Are you really kicking me out of the house?" And, he's like, "Look, you're old enough, you're going to be fine, but, this is something that you have to do. And, your bed is still there. You're welcome, but we want you to grow up." So, again, if you know what that feels like, you'll appreciate that I was terrified. And now all of your comfort is gone. Now you all of a sudden are like, "Oh, wow, I'm living in a black dorm." I'm a white boy. And I'm on my own. And what was funny about it is that, we went to lunch and my father got in the truck and, drove off and headed back to New York. And I went home, and the first thing I did, what does every kid do? Call mom. And she knows right away, and this was way before cell phones. So it wasn't like dad picked her up, picked up the phone and called mom and was like, "I did it, hon. We're free." It was like, nothing like that. She just knew instantly the minute that the phone rang and she picked up and I said, "Hey, mom," she was just like, "So how does it feel to be on your own?" And it was just like, she was supporting him. She knew. And it was like, yeah, whatever I hoped that I could say to mom that was going to get me back in, that wasn't happening. She was probably the one who really orchestrated it anyway, because she was that type of person. But it was the fact that then she lovingly, made me know that, look, they wouldn't do this unless they truly believed in me. That was the first thing. But the second thing was that, that is what I then realized was the guidance and protection that not only parenthood is about, but leadership is about. So I'm not, no disrespect to any parent out there. I'm a parent of 2 boys myself, but you're not doing your children service if you don't let them go out there and make mistakes and grow.
Absolutely.
And the courage that it takes, especially 18-year-old boy, grew up in, Brooklyn to make this leap of faith, but also as parents to stand by and say, "You know what, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. And you're not going to just run back home. That's not going to happen. You made this commitment. We're going to stand by you and tell you, go after it." So that's what happened, was that, I got this talk from her in which she was like, "You're going to do this. We got all the support, the faith in you that you're going to be fine. So there's nothing to cry about here. If anything, you should be excited. You're on your own. You don't have to listen to us anymore. We can now work on being friends." And that was the cool thing about it, was that I started to realize that. And, this brings up another, part to growing up that, for some listeners, they may really identify with. My mother was what I call a functional alcoholic. And for, those of you who don't know, what a functional alcoholic is, somebody who gets up in the morning and they can't get through the morning without a drink. And
Mm,
throughout the day, they have to take a drink every so often just to feel stable.
mm, mm,
And by the end of the day, they don't realize that they're no longer, in control. And then,
mm,
there were lots of days where my mother, by the end of the day, was passed out on the couch, and my mother and my sister and I had to try to wake her up and carry her upstairs before my father got home, just so that there wasn't this hostility or, this,
mm.
knockdown, drag out fight, because it sometimes happened and it was because she was drunk. But she was functional. She made sure that we had 3 square meals, fabulous food. She made sure the house was always clean. She made sure she did her work, and she, held down jobs, and she was this phenomenal person. She went on to get her master's in education, and, she was one of the pioneers of early childhood education. Um, exceptional person, but she just could not survive in this real world with all of her talent and success, because of being a woman in this, very male dominated society. And integration wasn't easy.
Yeah.
Women weren't looked at as equal.
Mm,
Even with the civil rights movement just being passed, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden people snap their fingers overnight and say, hey, we're all equal.
mm,
And so I didn't realize until I was in college and, then became, a professional, and eventually chose the life of an entrepreneur, what it was to be like my mother. But
mm,
it started in college because I started to realize, hey, if I'm going forward and my parents are by my side, they're not going to let me fail. They're not going to let me come home, but they're not going to let me fail. And in saying that, it's not that they're going to throw money at me and anytime I get into a problem, they're just going to solve it. What it means is that they're by my side. And every time I have a problem, the first thing I can do is call them up and say, I have this problem. And they're going to say, well, what do you need to do about it? Okay, put it back on me. You got a problem. How are you going to handle this problem? And then if there's something that I need from them that I don't have that they can provide, we can figure it out. But it was never sort of like, we're just going to give you money. They didn't have it like that, number one, and they didn't want that for me, number two. So money was always the last thing that was ever discussed.
mm.
That was one of the things was that try to figure it out however you can, ask local friends or family, whatever, probably not every problem was money anyway. um but that leads to it, another story which I'll share in a minute. But the point is that my my relationship with my mother grew by leaps and bounds in accepting who she was and
Mm,
understanding that her source was damaged, and she was using alcohol as a way of numbing
yeah.
that damage in her source. So as I went forward and I learned about people and I, dated and, got into relationships, and that's another thing is, dating interracially at that time, I might as well have been in the 50s. You know,
Mhm,
I was not well looked upon, dating black women in the early 90s. Spike Lee had just come out with Jungle Fever, and
mhm.
yeah, it was somewhat cool, but the truth was that no, it was never a welcome thing. And even with my
We're
parents,
not, our society is not ready for it. We pretended to be, but we
that's
weren't.
that's exactly right. So what happened is that I went on and I realized that very quickly that Oberlin was not the right choice for me. And I transferred to NYU. I
Mhm,
got into the film school, and it was a very, quick, fun story, but
mhm,
fabulous guidance person, advisor at Oberlin, who I was a tuba player.
mhm,
And, I was one of the top tuba players in New York State. And I, got to Oberlin College, and I was in the symphony and the jazz band. And my advisor, who was the head of the jazz ensemble, basically sat down with me and he was just like, Jason, I'm going to give it to you straight. You have more talent than every person in this conservatory in your pinky. He was like, you are phenomenal. You could be whatever you wanted musically. He was like, you have a God given talent for being able to just pick up a sheet of music, read it, play it, and make it sound like you practiced for 100
mhm.
hours. and you didn't
Mhm.
practice at all.
Mhm.
But if you want to be a musician and get paid as a musician can get paid, you have to be willing to practice 8 hours a day for the next 4 years and beyond and just work at this thing, man. And you don't want to. It's not what you want to do. It's like I can see it all over you. You know, you love sports, you love, you know, all of these different activities, and you're so dynamic. You're not going to be tied down to doing this one thing for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
just not going to happen. And I have to tell you straight up, you know, as your advisor, that I've already put in a call to a friend at NYU. All you have to do is, you know, produce a video. I don't know how you're going to do it, but this is what you have to do. Fill out this application, produce a video, and you're going to be in NYU next year. And I was just like, okay, I guess I'm going to be in NYU next year. And I called up my parents and I was just like, Mom, you're not going to believe what happened. And notice I said, I call up my parents, but I spoke to my mother because that's how it was. My father was always silent. He would listen. And, you know, I would tell Mom, you know, yeah, I had this conversation and, you know, this is what I'm doing. And, you know, she was like, well, are you okay with that? Are you comfortable? Is this a good, you know, is this what you want to do? And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I think it is. And, you know, I loved Spike Lee and, you know, my favorite movie of all time is Casablanca. But I was just like, why not? Let's go for it. And so I filled out and I made this video about Oberlin athletics. And I teamed up with a buddy who was a senior and I was a freshman and he was doing his senior thesis. And I was like, well, I'll edit it for you. And
Mhm.
I, you know, edited and, oh, we lost Rasha.
Okay, we're back, everyone. Apologies about that technical difficulties. It does happen,
It
but
does.
we left it at a great place. I just want to say this because it's something exceptional just happened, and I had an awe moment as Jason was still in his story, and I think that it's really important if you are a parent that you realize what just happened with his mom. She allowed him the opportunity to transition from now like being the son that lives at home into let's work on our friendship, and then our relationship is now transitioning. You're 18 years old, you'll always be my son, but at this point I want you to be the man that you intend to be, because she allowed him to be himself. And even though she was struggling with her own personal issues that I imagine are never easy. Anyone that's struggling with any form of addiction, and I mean from tobacco to drugs, it really does not matter. And how well you think you're functioning with it or not so much, it really does not matter. The fact is, this amazing woman still knew that I love my kids and I love my husband and I love this family. And I have enough sense of awareness to allow my son to transition from being my boy into now I want you to be my friend. And hence the reason he was never afraid to make the decisions that he continued to make throughout his life. And I mean, and I can tell you right now, as Jason's friend and a partner in business, Jason is not afraid of change. Crazy things could happen. Like, oh my God, it's freaking cold and we're dealing with a snowstorm and my heater went out. Let's do this meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like that. It's like I have two kids at home, biracial kids, by the way. I have two kids at home and the heater went out. And yeah, so what's our agenda for today? And I'm like, how are the kids doing? I'm freaking out hearing the story, but that all comes from the way that he was raised, right? And the fact that your mom was gracious enough, intelligent enough, loving enough to help you with the transition, that now that like you're recognizing all of these different talents that you have, but you're not afraid to explore what do I really want. Here your advisor is telling you, man, you have this great talent, but if you really want to stick to it, these are the requirements. You need 8 hours of training, and you're like, there are other things that I want to explore. I'm not afraid to be who I really am. I'm on this journey to figure out who Jason really is. Like I'm stepping out and choosing an African American dorm to live in, and everyone does not look like me because I'm trying to figure out who Jason is. So yeah, hey, I found a great talent. That's another thing under my belt, but there's other things that I really want to do. So I needed to like say that and
You did a
commend
great
your
job of saying
mom.
that.
I just did like really commend your mom
Yeah.
because I'm not a mom, but I can totally relate to how she must have felt. And I think it's really, really important that we highlight that because it's the like parents today. I mean, what we try to do is provide a sense of security to our kids. But sometimes what really does is that put all these bars in front of them and then they continue with that the rest of their lives. So it's almost like you imprison them. But what you really need to do is help them fly off.
Yeah. Yep.
Teach them to just, hey, don't be afraid to take off.
That's exactly right.
You gotta go find out what those. I'm not gonna impose my limitations upon you. You need to go figure out what life means for you, and that's what your mom did.
That's exactly
Um,
right. Yeah.
and
So,
it's not easy as a woman. So I'm gonna let you take it from here.
yeah, no problem. So yeah, here I was, and I made this video, and I dropped it off at NYU, and within 3 months, I had an acceptance letter from NYU, just like my advisor told me.
Wow.
And I was in the film school, which at the time, which is still today, we are number one, the number one
Yes.
school in the country, and that was
Yeah.
the fact that I could put that on my belt. But now all of a sudden I was back in New York and all my friends were, everywhere else. And my street friends had gone on to, whatever they were doing in life, whether it was good or bad. So I was suddenly not familiar with my own hometown. And I was in this totally different place and I couldn't stay home. So I had to find a place on campus and I lived up in Union Square. And I summarize NYU is that I took it as seriously as anybody could. And I approached it with a business mindset. I was going to, being a transfer student, you lose credits. And so you're behind. I did some summer classes at St. John's. I did, some extra assignments and internships for credit. But I was actually focused on getting a double degree. So I had a BFA and a BA. And I wound up doing a triple major and a triple minor as well. So I had my film degree with a minor in mathematics because there's a lot of math that goes into production as well as finance. And then in the BA, it was in Africana studies, of course, because I was already studying African American studies. But I picked sociology, anthropology, and history. And
Wow.
history actually became my love.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought that I would be, excited about history, but hence we're now talking about stories and storytelling. And history is all about storytelling. And this is where I fell in love with storytelling was ironically enough, now you connect film with history and telling stories. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, the entire world's history is stories to put on film. This is easy. I can do this, not a problem. And ironically enough, I really became fascinated with documentary and, having exactly what we now do as podcasts, these types of conversations where you learn about people and their stories. So it was one of those things where I narrowed down on what I wanted to do from, a business standpoint of college. And I had my extracurricular activities. I was on the basketball team. I had, stopped playing a lot of other sports. I gave up music. I focused on this. I was dedicated to a girlfriend who was going to Dartmouth College, and I was just very principled. And what was really cool was that I was in the exciting time of the mid 90s, which was the dot-com era being born. And suddenly I was in a very exciting place because it was also the transformation of film to digital was happening at the same time. So that whole world of integration, not only was I a child of integration, but now we're integrating film into digital technology and we're learning this whole new science and economy and everything of online. And I start moonlighting for different .com startups and working with computers and the network and, usernames and passwords and IP addresses and WANs and, everything that you could imagine. And my mind is just, racing forward.
Mm.
And I graduate and have an awesome relationship with the director of the career services office at NYU. And I gave him my resume and he looks at all the stuff I've done and he was just like, dude, we have a job for you here.
Mm.
We're not letting you go anywhere. You're coming to work for us. And
Mhm.
I'm just like, okay. And I go through an interview and they hire me after one interview. And the actual head, her name was Trudy Steinfeld, a lot of respect to her. Trudy pulled me into her office. The first day I showed up on time. In fact, I showed up 15 minutes early and I was, dressed to the nines, suit, tie, everything. And she pulls me into her office and says, I want to compliment you. And I don't
Mm.
compliment people. And you're new here. She was like, but the fact that you showed up early and you're dressed the way you are, I'm really excited for you.
Mm.
Like,
Mm.
okay, well, this is a good start.
Yes.
What was really funny about it is that if you think of a tech person, they wear t-shirts or polo
Right.
shirts and they're not really into dress. And I never approached it that way. It was a job to me. And going back to Michael Jordan, you dressed professionally. And Alan McFarland, who was the person who, was really my person, and I have to shout out to him. Alan was the one who got me that job, and he was the associate director. And to this day, Alan and I are friends. And whenever
Wonderful.
I'm, looking for a new trend or something to get into, I call up Alan. I'm just like, what do you think of this? And Alan's always like, yeah, man, do your thing.
Mm.
But Alan also represented that. And every NYU student who knew Alan, and he's still there today, Alan always was dressed to the nines. And so that was
Mm.
my model. I was going to be Alan McFarland's shadow in terms of how he dressed, I dressed.
Mm.
Great suit, great tie, great socks, great shoes, everything put together. And that was the way Michael Jordan, dressed. And it was funny. I sat down with Alan with the first week that I was working for NYU's Office of Career Services. And that was exactly what we talked about, was the fact that Michael Jordan shows up to the press conference in a full suit and tie. And that's how you show up to work.
Mhm.
And so I took that going forward and I was in this, incredible era of .com. And I went on from NYU to work for MTV Networks and learned about the content management system platforms. And I decided to start my own company. And I found a buddy. We were working for a .com together. It was called Shop the Net from A to Z. And it was supposed to be the first online shopping mall. We saw that it wasn't really headed in the right direction. And, he asked me, what's your big idea? And while I was at MTV, I sort of imagined the future being a world where anybody who had creativity in them could leverage their creative talent and show their wares online. And if there was a way that we could leverage their creative talent and display it to the world and allow people to network and create products and ideas and services together in a very fluid way.
Mhm.
Um, but we could manage it for them because creators don't want to be in business. Creators just want to create and they want somebody to handle the business in an honest, trustworthy fashion and make sure that they're getting their cut of it. But just do things the right way. And I was just like, if there's a way that we could do that, that's what I want to do. And the guy was like, that's a great idea, man. Let's do it.
See, and that's exactly how even right now, uh, within our own business and what we are helping our own coaches, I realize, and our business owners, and how to align those relationships, like people, aligning people with your business and profit. Because once you're connecting these three, your profit is going to be a side effect, and then it's going to increase and scale as you continue to provide more service, that it where you're really adding value. And you realize that at such an early age.
Yep.
You can't just skip over MTV like you didn't say anything. Like you have got to say how you got into MTV. That is just so cool. And back then that was like the coolest thing. It's the only thing I watched. So you can't just skip over that. You have to tell us what happened with MTV.
Okay, so real quickly, being at NYU, I was the head of the technology, for
Mm-hmm.
the Office of Career Services, and we actually were one of the first online platforms for job acquisition, job searches.
Mm-hmm.
And we were copied by lots of different universities after that. And it was called CareerNet. And I was the person who basically took CareerNet from being a very dysfunctional application to really allowing the 40,000 universities, students and alumni to be able to access every day and get jobs and really help people to place talent through these different job board positions. And MTV saw that.
Mm-hmm.
We were at a career fair, and I was speaking to one of the reps at MTV because they were recruiting, and they were like, "You're the dude in charge of CareerNet. We need to talk to you." And they literally just, invited me. It was supposed to be coffee, and wound up being 3 hours lunch where, I wound up with a, huge bunch of people. And it literally came down to, do you know Unix? And I said, well, I've had to learn it a little bit. And they were like, well, do you know Corn Shell? And I was like, yeah, funny enough, that's what, I'm using to do these little things. And they were like, okay, can you show us how you would do this? And I was just like, well, you don't want to do that. You want to do something else. I don't remember exactly what it was,
Mm-hmm.
but I stopped and I was just like, why are you doing it this way? And they were like, because it does this, this, and this. And I was just like, but if your end goal is to, transition data from one system to another, and your problem is that that data is convoluted, you need to filter it first. Why are you taking this painstaking process, and why aren't you just putting it into a totally different system first, sorting it there, and then filtering it as you need it? And the guy was like, you're hired.
Mm-hmm.
No more interview. He's just like that. That is, he was like, just the fact that you think that way and you look at the problem for what it really is that again, going back to the source, where is the problem?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you're really trying to accomplish, and what's the real problem? You have junk in your system that you need to get rid of. And the only way to, and I was a huge, sort of science fiction buff, but the only way to transition something, like we joke about, in Star Wars when they used to, beam down, how they would, stand on the teleporter and they would disappear and then they would reappear wherever they were supposed to be. So the only way to do that is that you have to take a picture of every atom and molecule of the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And disintegrate them and then reconfigure them somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
The idea
Mm-hmm.
of teleportation. So
Mm-hmm.
that's all I was doing. Was I was saying you simply have to take, the copy
Mm-hmm.
and transform it somewhere else so that you can operate on it. You're not,
Mm-hmm.
changing the original, and then you can
Mm-hmm.
do whatever you want in a sandbox. And it was a simple solution, but for them, it was just like the greatest thing in the world. And that was
Mm-hmm.
how we
Of
started
course it is.
time management.
Yeah, and for all entrepreneurs out there, this right here, this is the perfect example of how you can continue to make a contribution to your organization that is going to elevate the business that they're doing and is going to add real value. And in return, of course, that you're going to be rewarded from it. This is the perfect example of how being so good at what you do, being the expert in your area, and then not being afraid of applying that at work, so that when someone is telling you, well, this is what I want to do, how do I do it, now you're saying, okay, I identified the real problem and I have a suggestion for you, and being able to provide that suggestion in a simplified way that just clears out the problem. So now there's no problem, exactly the way Jason did it here.
Yeah.
So this is what you're supposed to do. Had to say that, Jason.
No
Okay, go.
problem. And so that was how we got into content management system. And that was what I took forward to the company that I started called Spiral Connection. And the long story short is that what I focused on was trying to create a real business plan. This is my first real business venture. I'm thinking as big as possibly can that, we're going to control the world through content. And just the idea of having a piece of everything that's created in the world, from an
Yes.
intellectual property standpoint. And we're sort of the bank, we're the asset
Yes.
repository. And months and months go by, and I was living off of my savings, and then I was living off of unemployment, and then I was living off of hand to mouth as I was doing jobs, but I was concentrating on the business plan. And I'm giving it out to people. I'm trying to do everything that the SBA is telling me. I'm getting advisors and counselors and all of this different stuff. And I feel like I'm being, going in 100 different directions. And of course, my parents are just like, you're crazy. You left $150,000 job to live hand to mouth doing what? And they were trying to be supportive, but at the same time, they saw
I
the
don't understand
lifestyle
what you're
from,
doing.
you can pay bills and now you're struggling just to make, your money
Yeah.
stretch to the end of the month.
Yeah.
But I had a very, very meager lifestyle. And I knew right away that the life of an entrepreneur is not the shake and bake lifestyle that people present. You are not a baller. You are taking the vow of poverty, and you are stretching every dollar as fast as you can, as far as you can. And, you're hustling. And so I became a hustler in that regard. And I was literally giving my business plan out to everybody. It was the same thing that I had learned in film school, where you give out your script to everybody, whether they
Yeah.
can read or not. You don't even care if they're dyslexic. Just here, here's the
Right.
story, get the picture, give it to somebody, and hopefully it'll get somewhere. And for me, what happened was that, I was promoting it every day, 24/7. A buddy of mine from college was working for Bear Stearns, and he calls me up and he's just like, dude, I got your business plan from somebody, and I've got somebody for you. He wants to have a conversation with you. And so I'm like, okay, cool. Put him on the phone. He's like, no, not now. He was like, you have to come in. So, I go down to the World Trade Center, and this is in July of 2001. And this guy who just, all I can tell you is that you knew this guy was worth money. And I went down there. I don't remember his name, but we're in his office. He's got this huge conference table, and he's sitting at one end. I'm sitting all the way at the other end. And this is my buddy. His name is Mike Parks, worked for Bear Stearns. And he gets me this guy an interview. And the guy is just like, so tell me about Spiral Connection. And I go into what's called an elevator pitch. And my elevator pitch was, at the time, if you can imagine a creative world where everybody, has the ability to produce what's in their mind and share it with the world. And now Coca-Cola and every other company that wants to touch people with their products is using this creativity. That's what Spiral Connection is. We're creating and facilitating the creativity for people to really spark ideas and artistic talent throughout the world.
Beautiful.
And he looks at me for a second, and he was like, are you familiar with Halley's Comet? And funny enough, I had seen Halley's Comet when I was a kid. My father took me out to the park in the middle of the night and was like, this isn't going to happen again in your lifetime, unless you're really, really lucky, because it's once every 76 years. And, it's a huge thing. And there are lots of people out there. And I was like, yeah, I know it's Halley's Comet. He was like, are you familiar with the tail theory? I'm like, no. And he says, the tail theory is that basically Halley's Comet is a certain size and mass. And the tail of Halley's Comet is about 100 times the size and mass of Halley's Comet. So Jason, what you are proposing with Spiral Connection is basically to own the tail of Halley's Comet. And I said, well, I never thought of it that way, but yeah, we want to control every piece of, creative content in the world through our content management system. And he was like, how much do you need? And I was like,
Mm.
well, in our business plan, we're asking for $10 million. He was like, okay, um, let's set a date. Um, we'll need a final presentation. Thank you. And that was the meeting. I'm like, wait,
Mm.
what?
Mm.
Just like, yeah. And the date was September 11th.
Wow.
And I was through the roof. And, I spent the next month and a half working my ass off to put together this incredible presentation. And the morning of September 11th, I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning,
Mm.
dressed suit and tie to the nines, ready for this. And I'm sitting there and I'm, working on everything. And I fall asleep at my desk. And the next thing I know, the phone rings and it's my best friend. She worked at Amex just, down the street from the World Trade Center at 61 Broadway. And she was just like, thank God you're home. A plane just flew into the World Trade Center. And I'm like, okay. And I hang up the phone and I'm like, wait, what? Holy shit, where am I? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm late for my meeting. And I call up Mike Parks and Mike is just like, you'll get down here. And I'm running as I'm talking to him. I've got my presentation. I'm headed to the train station, which is 5 blocks away. And, I hang up the phone from Mike. I get to the station and I'm on the platform and there's this announcement that there are no more trains going into the city. And I call my mother. I don't know why, but I call my mother and
Your anchor.
yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
I call her up and she's just like, thank God, where are you? I was like, I'm on the train platform. I missed my train. I fell asleep, and I never fall asleep. I'm always, early. And here I am. I'm just like panicking. And she's just like, another plane just flew into the World Trade Center. And I'm like, wait, you got to be shitting me. And so I call Mike back and the phone's dead. And, I call my mother back and I'm like, what should I do? And she, basically is like, go home.
Mm.
So, I go home and I turn on TV and she and I are on and we're trying to find my father and my sister and all my friends. And we watch the towers fall together.
Mm.
And then suddenly realized, oh, wait, I was supposed to be in that building and I was supposed to be picking up a $10 million check. And, um, this is the end of my business. The world has just changed. And I didn't know what to do other than, how could I help? I had this feeling in me.
Yeah.
How could I help? And, the first thing was that, my best friend called me and she had walked over the bridge. My sister called, she had walked over the bridge. My father stayed in his office at 2 Broadway until I was safe. And then he walked across the bridge. And so fortunately, all of my loved ones, or most of my loved ones were safe. Tragically, Mike um, did not make it. And that was tough. So, everybody went down in the building, that was the end of,
But that's the gentleman that
yeah,
you were supposed to meet.
that was my buddy.
He did not make it.
He did not make it. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you fell asleep and you were late to that meeting.
that's correct.
I just, wow.
Yeah. So, um, I wanted to help. And at first I was going to sign up and I was going to go down there and dig the bodies out and do whatever I can. I called my mother. I was like, Mom, I want to help. And she was just like, look, it's dangerous. I can't stop you, but, you really have to think about, you just lost your business. You have to think about what you're doing. And, that's one of my problems. I don't think about myself as much as I think about other people, but that's also a gift. And in this case, what happened was I wound up over a couple of days sitting down and thinking about it. And one of my advisors to the company was this Jamaican gentleman. He's about twice my age, had this uh, Morgan Freeman voice in a
Mm.
Bob Marley accent. And I always used to joke with everybody that, he was like Bob Marley and Morgan Freeman all in one. And he's
Mm.
the coolest guy in the world. He sits down with me and he's just like, let's have a glass of white rum. And I was like, I don't drink. And, he was just like, well, you're going to drink today because
Mm.
you've been through something and, you need a drink. And, I had been a teetotaler because of my mother's alcoholism, but I was like, okay,
Yeah.
you know what? I've lived in black dorms. One thing that I know is, you immerse yourself in people's culture and you respect them. So I had a drink of white rum, which, my God, is that stuff rocket fuel? And, uh, you know, it's a stiff drink,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
he shared it with Coke, and,
Hmm.
rum and Coke is actually a great drink. And
Hmm.
I wound up falling in love with it. Uh,
Hmm.
that's a whole nother story. But he said, "What are you going to do?" He said, "You just lost your company. You got no job, and obviously you need one, and you got to figure out how to make money." And I said, "Well, I think I'm going to go into real estate." And he's just like, "Okay, I just said you have no job and no money, and you just lost your company. How are you going into real estate?" And I said, "Well, there are all these displaced people in downtown Manhattan, and there are all these abandoned buildings in Brooklyn. I think if I fix up some buildings in Brooklyn and I put some solar rooftops on them, I could, give people a better quality of life. And, these planes that flew into the World Trade Center, obviously, we need to change our way of life. Oil is, going to run out. This is not sustainable. And, I just see the future as being renewable technology, solar and wind and this. And I'm going to put my money on solar. I want to go into solar, and I want to, just do something that gives people a better quality of life." And he was just like, "That's a great idea. Let's go into business."
Okay,
And
just well,
yeah,
I had to stop you right here
yeah.
because something phenomenal just happened.
Hmm.
All right, now everyone like remembers what they were doing on 9/11 and where they were and how they took the news, and everyone was impacted by it. And there was a lot of us that lost a loved one during that time. You were what's called an opportunity of your lifetime that may not have happened again. You were supposed to get a $10 million check to just proceed this great opportunity. And then something crazy happens that completely out of your hands. But thank God you're well and you're alive and you're here. And rather than thinking, oh my God, why me? I can't believe this thing happened to me. I could have been doing this and that, and life could have been so different for me. And you could have been completely devastated, rightly so. But you, rather than dwelling on that, you've asked a very, very important question. You said, how can I help?
Yeah,
And because you put that out there on how can I help, you saw a great opportunity in all these places that were once in Manhattan that could really be moved to Brooklyn if we just create a place for them,
that's right.
right? And because you put yourself out there in a position to how can I help with no money and coming up with a great idea that really does need a lot of money, you already positioned yourself into a limitless opportunity rather than playing victim and creating all these limiting beliefs and feeling sorry for yourself and everyone else around you, and rightly so. You took yourself completely out of that and created a brand new opportunity for you that really just helped a lot of people, and you got someone else's buy-in into your idea,
That's correct.
right? So that I just that's what everyone needs to do. And quite frankly, if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to have to continue to put yourself in that position because it's the only way that you're going to survive.
So,
uh,
yeah.
this is my partner, you guys. I'm really proud of her.
so so yeah, we went into business 1 month to the day after 9/11, and I still have the original incorporation papers. It's one of the few things I
Hmm.
still have. But it was a proud moment, and we actually shook
Yeah.
hands on the courthouse steps of Queens County. And it was exciting. It was weird. It was like, so in the ashes were rising up and we're doing something. And the ironic part about it is that we never bought a building in Brooklyn, because very quickly we were priced out of the market, and we learned, every aspect of real estate, from the auction steps, and
Mm-hmm.
how buildings are sold and homes are sold from foreclosure, and all the shady things that go on in the real estate industry. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it was an amazing experience. And and for the next 2 decades, that's really what I concentrated on, was green environmental development and, clean technology. And my focus, was how do we make things more efficient and, better performance? So every building, every project, everything that we did, it was a matter of how do we make it better? And I had read this phenomenal book, which I recommend to everybody. It was Harvey Firestone's Men in Rubber, The Story of Business. And in it,
Mm,
there were two questions. Can it be simplified? And why is this necessary? And it
mm,
became my mantra in terms of being an entrepreneur and being an executive and really building a business and a team was that why is this necessary? And can it be simplified? Can we improve the performance? Can we improve the efficiency? Can we reduce the cost and get better results? And you're talking about real estate, but you're also talking about why are we even doing this?
yeah.
And for me, I started to focus on, okay, there are three bills that I have no control over when it comes to real estate property: taxes, insurance, and mortgage. They are
Mm,
what they are. But the
mhm,
two bills that I can control is your heat and your electricity.
mhm,
And if I could lower those two bills significantly, I can improve your quality of life.
mhm,
And then on top of that, if I can use the right resources, the right materials and supplies that are responsible, I have an even better impact on you
mm,
in terms of
mm,
no VOCs. And this is before all of this was going on. So we learned about this stuff and we applied it to our business and I became engrossed. My blinders were on. We can only do it this way going forward. We
mhm,
cannot misbehave in any way in terms of compromising on these critical values of the right materials and the right performance and the right economy, because the building is going to cost what it's going to cost and you're going to pay what you have to pay on the mortgage for it based on the
mhm,
percentage rate. And
mhm.
yes, you have a little bit of control on the percentage rate based on your credit, but otherwise the market is what the market is. So
Right.
the only thing that you really have opportunity with is the heat and electric. And, for some people, it's also water and waste. And so we started to evaluate all of these different things. And we had properties that we had invested in Hawaii and California. We got involved in, developing in Jamaica and Florida and Maryland and Texas. And as all of this stuff was going on, I started to sort of say, okay, how do we converge it together? And you'll notice another thing about me is that this whole idea of, how do I bring it all together?
Yeah.
And it goes back to music and, film and, how do I integrate these things? And, again, the source. So again, from that standpoint, I want to bring it back to storytelling is that little boy, that 5-year-old was still alive and well in terms of, okay, how do I take all of these things so that when I'm angry, I'm not doing the wrong thing and that I'm just delivering positive message throughout and that the system is healthy. So as I'm trying to build the company and a lot of it again goes back to business planning and working with and this was the other thing was that half the businesses that we wound up working with were in the real estate and environmental industry had no business plan. So they would
Mm,
actually have me, they would hire me. I'd come to them looking for their product and I wind up writing their business plan and helping
mm.
them in their business. And it was because
Incredible.
it was this thing where I was like, well, why are you doing it this way? We want to integrate it this way. And what I didn't, know at the time was that I was trying to create what are now called smart cities. First, it was
Mhm,
smart homes, and I had seen Bill Gates do a demonstration with Microsoft about what a home could be with computers. And I was just like, that's cool. I want to do that. Buck Rogers, 25th century, Star Trek, but I don't want it to be nerdy and geeky. I want it to be just like, you see our background. I want it to
yeah.
be integrated with the planet. I want it to be integrated with nature in a way that your external environment and your internal environment are resonating at the same frequency. And that's another thing about us, and exceptional results now, just to plug us, is that authenticity comes from within. And when you resonate from the inside out and you lead from the inside out, again, you're leading from the source and you're
Mm,
healthy and you're projecting all of these things. And And that's what it was for me, was that how do I create a healthy home that creates a healthy community, that creates a healthy city? And that's what smart cities, the idea of smart cities are. So the last 2 decades of my life have been focused every day on how do I get there? How do I get people to these healthy cities and healthy communities and healthy homes? And so everything that we did was a matter of pushing the ball forward. And unfortunately, 3 years ago, my business partner had enough, and I totally respect that. He was, again, twice my age when he started, and he was in his 70s. The challenge of it is that we'd been through the financial crisis of 2008. We had to give up so many properties because they were underwater. I had to negotiate millions of dollars of debt, just to try and keep the company afloat. We had this one project in upstate New York. We had bought this castle and this 330-acre magnificent, majestic parcel of property that overlooked the Mohawk Valley. It was looking out on the Adirondack Mountains, and it had this history. 3 U.S. presidents had been to the castle. It was called Gelston Castle, and it was built by a woman named Harriet Douglas, and it was a Scottish ancestry. And Theodore Roosevelt grew up summering on the property. This is where he got healthy from asthma and learned to box. And he was sparring partners with the eventual owner of the property, a gentleman named Douglas Robinson. And he married Douglas Robinson's sister, who became Corinne Roosevelt Robinson. And it was one of the founders of the Museum of Natural History, where all of Theodore Roosevelt's collections from the Smithsonian are. And we're a part of that. We bought this property, and my business partner is, saying that because his middle name is Douglas, he's related to the owners, and that he was a slave of the Douglas family. And we use it as a narrative. I have no idea if this is true or not, but it's like, okay, we'll run with it if it gets us attention and people are interested in us. But the point behind it is that we had this wonderful roller coaster ride, and he just decided it was time to get off. And now I'm like, okay, I'm just trying to turn the corner on the business. What do I do now? I've got to shift our focus, and I believe I can turn this property into something. I've got some interest from some solar developers and some other people. You have no idea whether or not it's going to work or not. I mean, financially, we were in dire straits because we never recovered from the 2008. We were just treading water. We were, solar installers. We were anything that somebody would hire us for, truthfully, in the environmental industry. And otherwise, we just believed in this vision. We had produced rock concerts. We had the former members of the Grateful Dead as Further perform on our property. We had this group Mo run their festival Modown. We'd had George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic. We did everything you could imagine to attract people, to try to make money, to do things for the community. And the underarching or underlying focus of all of this, and the overarching focus of all of this, was that we had to do it green. We had to do it environmentally responsible. We had to do it in a way that the eventual smart city that was going to be here was growing from the ground up in the right autonomous whole environment, that it was healthy, and we were never financially healthy, but we figured we could figure that out. And then this little bug called a tick bites me, and my life changes. The worst part about this story is the fact that 1 year before, my father had been bitten by a tick and spent 7 weeks in the hospital. And they couldn't figure out what was wrong because they never knew that he had been bitten by a tick until somebody 6 weeks in said, hey, maybe we should do a Lyme test. And he had just signed a DNR, and we thought we were going to lose him. It was very, very serious. It was very critical. And he was just turned 81, or was just about to turn 81. He was 80 years old. And it was terrifying. And here I was, and thankfully, he's still with us, but
yes,
it was 1 year later. And I go to the doctor because I think I've been bit by a tick, and they say, no, it's a spider bite. And they give me a different medication called Keflex and send me home. And 3 weeks later, I know I'm not right. And I check myself into an urgent care facility. And very quickly, they send me in a hospital, in an ambulance to the emergency room. And I'm suddenly in critical care with a resting heart rate of 26 and a defibrillator strapped to my chest. And they say, dude, we don't know we have to have you tested, but we think this is Lyme. And you have a very rare form of it called Lyme carditis because you have a bacterial infection in your heart. There's nothing else this could be. But let's tell you how serious this is. You have what's called a stage 2 heart block, which means that at any second you could go into cardiac arrest.
Mm-hmm.
And because what Lyme does is that it messes up the electrical system in your heart, the defibrillator isn't going to guarantee that it does anything more than stop your heart.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, so how do you resuscitate me? We're like,
Mm-hmm.
we don't know if we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's like, okay, I could die
Right.
at any
Mm-hmm.
second. And
Mm-hmm.
I, have a wife, a 3-year-old, and a newborn 3-month-old at home. We're renovating our new house.
Mm-hmm.
My business manager comes in, tears streaming down her face. And I'm trying to act like it's okay. And she's just like, you can't say that. You have all these machines around you. You have doctors and nurses coming in every 5 seconds to check on you. You're in critical care. And we don't know what we're going to do without you. And I'm suddenly like, okay, what happens if I'm gone? How do I protect all these people and all these outstanding business issues and responsibilities? And, I've got vendors and suppliers and customers and investors and banks, and I've got my family and friends and all these people that are dependent on me. And I realize I have enabled everybody. I haven't empowered anybody. And suddenly I knew my life had to change. And I looked at everything I had done in this environmental world. And I'm like, why did I go in this direction? I'm not making any money. It's been an incredible experience, but I have not been successful in terms of really making money. I've been successful in terms of doing some of the coolest projects in the world and writing books and being a professor at different colleges and teaching real estate and technology and business and traveling the world and being able to say that I have installed these megawatts of renewable energy. And I own a venue that produces rock concerts and was owned by Theodore Roosevelt's family. And I can say all this stuff, but I can't protect anybody right now.
Mm-hmm.
Something happens to me. And suddenly I have to stop and think about what is my purpose on earth? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And I don't know if you know what it feels like to have that, like your chest goes down into the ground. You're numb. You have all of these people that you love and want to take care of, and you feel helpless.
Mm-hmm.
And you're wondering, okay, why did the creator put me on this earth? Because I feel like an absolute complete failure.
Mm-hmm.
And the worst part about it is not only am I a complete failure, but I'm in this hospital bed and I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And I suddenly decided that not only was I going to shift my life, but I was going to use everything that I had learned and accumulated, and I was going to put it to use helping other people.
Mm-hmm.
And, people say, well, you were helping people the whole time. No, what I mean is that I suddenly realized that I had to take everything out of my mind and share it with other people. So I created this idea of the green mind, and it was an executive mindset, around the entrepreneur, but also the executive. You could be running a, Fortune 100 company and understand this mindset of impact. Why are we on this planet? And I sat down and I had a pad and a pen, and I thought about why did I want to save those people or help those people in downtown Manhattan. I went all the way back to the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. I lost my company. I was in technology. I was trying to integrate all these things. But why did I want to save those people? And I suddenly realized that I wanted to uplift humanity. That
Mm,
going back to that little boy, that 5-year-old who had that incident, that this is not right. People
mm,
are angry at me for using a word in anger because somebody did something that made me angry.
mhm,
Well, what's wrong here?
mhm,
I've been made to feel that I did something wrong. Did I do something wrong? I simply said something out of anger because somebody did something that made me angry.
mhm.
And I suddenly thought about it from the standpoint of everything I had done from that point going forward was being as human as possible
Mm,
and trying to uplift other people. And that
mm,
moment, I suddenly thought about it and I said, you know what? We could end hunger and homelessness tomorrow if we wanted to.
mhm,
We have the power and the resources and the capabilities, everything on this God given earth and human capacity. Right now, we could uplift the weakest among us.
that's so
Everything that's preached about in the Bible that Jesus wanted us as human beings to be able to do, we have the ability to do it. We're
mm,
not.
mhm,
And that became my primary mission in life going forward. And so I created this Green Mind initiative and I started moving forward. And the first thing was the fact that people really don't care about green. It didn't come across. I had written a book called Think Green, the Future is Awesome. I tried to get speaking engagements and the level of engagement was very limited because people were just like, I don't understand green. Why is it so important? And I was just like, you know what? I'm having the wrong message here. I gotta change. It's not them, it's me. And earlier this year we had the pandemic and I decided that I needed to, go back into consulting to both make some, money, go back to the hustler mentality. And I met you and we sat down and we were working for this company on remote systems management and a platform that could really help people in business to be able to operate from this, new remote way of life.
mhm.
And we aligned right away on the fact this is not what we're supposed to be doing, number one, but number two, whatever we do, we could do it 10 times better than this company.
Right.
Their management is not focused on helping people. Their management is focused on something else, and it's their choice what they want to do. But we need to do something better. And I'll never forget it. We were talking about, I had already, had a conversation with my mentor, and, I was going to write the book called Winning with Exceptionalism just based on my fundamental principles. And I'll never forget it. We started, talk about manufacturing and doing something powerful to help this economy. And
Mm,
going back to that same thing, we wanted to do something to help America. We wanted to do something to help the people. And I'll never forget it. You were just like, Jason, I don't care what we do. As long as you and I are doing something to help other people, I'm in 100%.
mhm,
And I said, well, what do you think of us just doing consulting? And it's about
mhm,
results. We want to
mhm.
show people we can get them results. And you were like, yeah. And literally Exceptional Results Now was just born.
Right.
And, it's been an incredible experience, and
That's
that's, so that's my story. And, and bringing it all together for people, and I know we've taken way more time than the normal podcast, but that is storytelling. And it's the experience for people. Now, a lot about who I am as a person,
mhm,
and you've been on this roller coaster. If you've been listening for the last hour and a half that we've been, on the air, I really appreciate you and thank you. And I hope I've given you an incredible story or a set of stories that make up my big
mhm,
story. But that is, why it is so important, because the, the story that you tell, the story of who you are, the authenticity of you, when you share that with people, that is how they connect with you. That is how they
mhm,
say, you know what? You're an awesome human being. And that's why
mhm.
I love stories. And it goes back to, again, college and the integration of history and film and me just saying, oh yeah, you know what? This is what I could do. And,
Right.
helping people to understand that it doesn't matter who you are. Again, if you're an entrepreneur or you want to be an entrepreneur, or you're the CEO of Pfizer right now. Congratulations on Pfizer with the pandemic and coming through, and the CEO being really, really determined. Your story is so important for
It
people
is.
to be able to understand the impact that you have, and how you look at your story is what's critical, because most people don't think that they have a story.
Mm,
And that's the failure of humanity, is that we have the ability to be exceptional. We are restricted throughout our lives by school and government and family and friends and everybody wanting us to play it safe. And if you look at our background, you see somebody leaping mountains. That is what Exceptional Results Now is about. We're
that's what we do.
That's right. We are trying to get you to just throw off all of that and be able to be your authentic self, be the kid that you are inside, but be a professional and deliver results that impact the world. And it starts with your story.
Mhm. Tell the truth about who you are, not be afraid to share it with yourself first. The most important relationship that you're going to have is the relationship that you're going to have with yourself first. And then you'll be able to flip that and then have those important relationships, whether with your family and then the friendships that you choose to develop and nurture, and the relationships that you're going to have in business. But it's the truth about yourself, and then being able to tell it so fiercely, just as Jason did today. Yes, it did. I know we took a lot of your time, and I appreciate if you've been sticking with us up to this point, but this is such an important story to tell, because it's his story, and it's the truth about him, just as important as it is that anyone else that's telling their story truthfully and not being ashamed of any of it and not trying to hide any of it or change any of it in their own mind so that it can become quote unquote acceptable in a society that doesn't even care. Like you need to create your own truth so you can take that leap, just like the picture that we have in the background, because that's really the type of life that you should have. Being able to make the transitions that Jason did throughout his life, leading up to this point, to creating this, to creating a firm that provides the type of service that allows people to live exceptionally in their own personal lifestyle, and having that translate into their business and the relationships that they have with people. So Jason, I thank you so much for being so courageous and telling stories that even I didn't know. And bringing that all together here, and just and being yourself. This is one of the reasons that people that are close to you love you as much as they do, including myself. And being so proud to do business with you and just bringing us up to this point. And I'm so looking forward to an exciting 2021. I think that we're ending the year strong. Just creating this consulting firm in the midst of all of that, and not only wanting to provide service, like as we mentioned before, not just within New York, but I mean globally, helping as many people as we can. That's our mission. Living exceptionally. So I really appreciate you having to do that for yourself first in order for you to be able to do it so many other people. Thank you so much for sharing so openly. Love and appreciate you. And I look forward to our next episode next Sunday, and where we're going to focus more on the mission and values and how you can create that with your own organization. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Rasha, it's always a pleasure, and I'm grateful to you too. Thank you so much. And to our listeners, have a wonderful rest of your day.